India. He's a very known expert in the field of defense. Uh, Gaurav Mehendiratta, he's a partner and head aerospace and defense KPMG India. So welcome, Gaurav.
Thank you.
Let's begin. It has been almost, I was watching Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman for 2 hours to hear that precious word on the defense budget, which did not come, I understand, and which come from the tweet of our Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, which he announced a increase of certain 1,000 crore from 4,71,000 crores to 4,78,000 crore. I see a marginal increase in defense budget. I have just given it a title in my article, which I have put it down as a marginal increase in defense budget reels under 9.5% fiscal imbalance in the budget 2021. I begin with Ms. Joshi. Please tell us where we are heading with this sort of defense budget.
Yeah, you're right. You see, there was so much of expectation and a build-up. I was also watching some of these programs pre the presentation of the budget, and there was a big hype that with the kind of situation we have in our northern and eastern borders, there would be a substantial jump in the defense allocations. But this hike has been very marginal. You have used the correct word. And actually, if you start, I think if you actually go into more details, there are some little silver lining, I would say. You see, typically 4.78 lakh crores, which has been allocated, has 4 components. That is the MOD civil budget, the defense services budget, which is both revenue and capital, and the pension budget. So the pension budget itself is about 1,15,000 crores in this financial year. So if you take that out and just look at the civil portion is very marginal. It's a very small component. So the major component is the defense services element, which is the revenue and capital of the 3 services and includes DRDO as well as ordnance factories. And if you look at the services component per se, the Army, Navy, the service defense services, what they call defense services, it is the allocation is 3,47,000 crores as against a BE of 3,23,000 crores. So that and in this element, if you just allow the element of the services, that is the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. What I find interestingly is that the capital allocation of the services has gone up by about 20,000 crores. So what was 1,02,362 crores in BE 2021 has now gone up to 1,22,951 crores. So that is heartening. The revenue component remains almost the same, but again, there is what should I say? There are some if you start analyzing the budget in more detail, then you come out with some other things. That if you actually compare the revised estimates 2021, actually there is a decrease in the allocation. So what looks like a 20,000 increase is actually a decrease because in the RE, the figure is 1,25,811 for the capital budget. And now in the budget estimate 21-22, it is 1,22,000. So if you compare B to B, yes, there is a substantial increase. But if you compare RE to B, then it is a downward trend. But and here also what I find is that the biggest gainer has been the Air Force. So it gives the impression that perhaps 10,000 crores has gone to the Air Force. So perhaps this is more for the committed liabilities of the Air Force, which are fairly high. And about 6,500 crores is for the Navy. And Army, surprisingly, which really is facing the brunt of the situation on the borders, the increase is about 4,000 crores from BE. So, I mean, I would say that it is a mixed bag. And on the other hand, if you look at defense pensions, I remember last year there were a lot was written about how the pensions is eating into the pensions and salaries are eating into the budget, and there is hardly any money left for modernization and capital budget. So there, surprisingly, the trend is now going downwards. So what was last year 133 crores, almost 133 lakh crores, 133,825 is now 115,850. So that there is either the pension has now kind of plateaued and it is coming down. I don't know. Really, one has to study that in more detail. So these are
thanks,
some
Ms. Doshi. Thanks for putting all the facts, and some of the elements within the defense budget. You said it's a mixed bag, and you said silver lining there. To Gaurav, do you see some silver lining? You have been raising and writing a lot of papers on army or defense modernization. How do you justify such budget? Or do you see, in fact, any increase keeping the inflation in account of that? Does it not look like the budget which has been in the past, in the last financial year? Gaurav Mehndiratta, your take on the budget to begin with.
So Manish, going after ma'am is going to be very difficult, and she's pulled down all the numbers, which I also have in my sheet here. So I guess, my answer is not different at all. I mean, if you compare the two budgets, while it looks, and I may not agree with your title that you're saying, because if you look at budget last year to budget this year, because while it shows only 1.5% growth in the numbers, but because the pensions have gone down significantly, the capital expense has gone up by 18 to 19%. Now that's the large, I would say, change. But ma'am also mentioned about revised estimates versus this, or that analysis I've not yet gone into. But between the two budgets, that's the big change. So it shouldn't be seen as a total number. It's the pension number which has gone down. Now, someone can look at it why the pension number went down. So that's a completely different ball game. From a policy standpoint, a larger policy standpoint, I think the mantra of the government over the last few years has been Make in India, right? And how to promote Make in India. And I wasn't really expecting many changes to come in this budget because so much happened in the last 6 months. We've really not seen so many changes in the last 7 to 8 years or maybe more. In one go, so many changes happened. One, DAP changed and bringing in new avenues of procurement, and one of the significant ones being in terms of buy global manufacture in India, which is to say that even large platform like fighters which are coming up, let's assume, could be bought from a overseas OEM, but there is a commitment that they make to make 50% of that in India. Second is FDI increase from 49 to 74. Again, a big change in that sense to say we don't care who manufactures should start happening in India. Again, a big psychological change there. Definition of Indian vendor being changed in the DAP, which allows such kind of subsidiaries also to bid for programs under the 5 of the 10 avenues of procurement. So many changes which came in were a push towards Make in India, and also the biggest one is the import ban of 101 items, which means over a period of next 5 years, 101 items will not be procured from India. Now that's to me, were the big changes that anyway happened. But to operationalize that, there are things which actually, requires maybe another consultation, will require maybe another year. Next budget will be the right time. But to have manufacturing of defense take place in India, you will have to give some kind of SOPs to come in. So, for example, I know we've gone away from exemptions and, for infrastructure sector and all, but all those sectors, telecom, infrastructure got their, fair share of tax exemption holidays for a significant period. Again, something to think about from a defense sector. It hasn't come in, I wasn't even expecting it, but in the future, PLI schemes have come in for electronics, all kind of manufacturings. Make in India, defense is one of the biggest pieces. That hasn't been thought through as well. So those, I think, are the things And I'll stop here and maybe request ma'am's comments. Of course, you will. But really, those are the things that government should now start looking at operational items to make big policy changes into implementation.
Gaurav, okay, one side you talk about, of course, the Make in India policy and the thrust which government has been doing. But having said that, now another side, you see the security paradigm and it has changed so much. The criticality at our border at LAC, and it's no open secret that China is there to remain for longer time. And this is all about building our capability in now and also in the near future, basically. And it's all about certain equation until we reach that state where we're able to make certain equipments which would be highly indigenized, will save costs and all that. This is the one aspect, but I also like to understand, because there was a lot of, as you said, okay, it was not expected, but it's also expected from a lot of quarters that there would be some increase, it's not a marginal, but certain increase in defense budget, knowing the criticality issue at the border. And second is a fiscal prudence, what we're talking about, which is now shot up to 9.5%, earlier estimated 3.5%. Is it so complex, or finance ministry has to go through some sort of say swinging rope on this aspect to Joshi to decide the budget and keep it like this to just keep the status quo intact? To Ms. Joshi, if you comment on this.
I think, see, one aspect you have to see in the overall context of this budget. As somebody was saying in the morning, this is an expansionary budget. There is a pressure on the government to kickstart the economy. So definitely their priority is something, which is going to make an immediate impact, provide jobs. The government is wanting to spend, very fast, so that that spending by the government spurs the economic activity. So I think that has been the thrust area. Having said that, after all, the kitty is limited. You have to, so from where will they actually find all the money? In fact, when I was just quickly looking at the figures, I found, one interesting thing was pension came down, and the revenue budget, which normally otherwise, the revenue eats into the army's, the services capital, but the revenue has remained by and large at the same level, from around 2 lakh crores last year, it's around, say, 2 crores. So it's nothing, no major jump. Now, where that, decrease has come, that is one has to see. So therefore, I think the very strong message from this budget is perhaps for the services that they have to find. Firstly, they have to relook at their whole concept of warfare. We are moving into different realms of warfare. Whether this heavy capital-intensive warfare is really needed, not needed, they need to optimize. There is a lot of duplication, because having worked in the system, I know there is a lot of duplication, and what happens is the services, the plans, the plans become aggregates of all the of all the wish list of all the three services. And up till now the CDS is there, but up till now, nobody had the guts to cut from each service. So each service was told, okay, you keep adding your plan, and it became a very unwieldy wish list kind of thing, So there is need to prioritize and make a much more leaner plan of what is really critically needed. So it boils down to that they need to prioritize what is to be bought. And another thing which I had used to say in a lot of forums earlier also, we keep looking at what we need to get, but there has been no comprehensive review of what we already have, and at what serviceability level is that capability functioning. If something is at 50% capability level, then you've already spent so much money and you're only getting 50% return. So that is an area which definitely needs to be addressed. Where the existing capability and its level of, if you see abroad, the concept is availability. If I have an aircraft, for how long is it available to me? 50% of the time or 30% of the time. So that fleet serviceability is a very important concept. And one point,
Ms. Joshi, if I can just interrupt you for a moment, you talked about the pension, which I think recently a whole lot of debate was raised, and you also rightly pointed out, there has been a status quo within the armed forces budget, which is given to MOD and the finance ministry. There has been a reluctance on part of change, a drastic change. Having said that, DMA proposal like graded pension structure to save on salaries and pension, which collectively amount almost half of the defense budget. And then there has been a some sort of slash down approach, in this defense budget. How did we manage to do that? And how controversial is this aspect of slashing the pension based on the graded reform? Because there's also debate between the civilian and services aspect of the defense budget, which is always raised by the armed forces. They say it is 40% of the services people. They also take the chunk of the defense budget, basically. What is your comment and take on this, Ms. Joshi?
No, the defense, MOD civil budget, where the civilian staff of the MOD secretariat and all would be handled, that is a separate component altogether. So I don't think it's really mixed up. And with regard to pension, see, already in the civil side, there is the new pension scheme. So the newer entrants do not have the luxury of getting pension. So that was the debate for the services side. But the services are reluctant, and their service conditions are definitely different. So you can't really compare the two. But I think what I this is another area which nobody really has looked into. But our budget structure of the format of the budget is a very, it's an input-based budget. And if you look at international norms, we need to have some output-based budget. If you see in the standard international practices, typically they will have expenditure. The expenditure will be maintenance, operations, infrastructure, R&D. So you actually know the But today our budget is stores, salaries. It's all input based. So if today I want to know how much do I spend on, say, the Sukhoi aircraft, which is, we have a fairly large fleet of the Sukhoi aircraft. How much am I spending on the Sukhoi program? I'll not be able to get that expenditure from the budget. I'll have to, cull out from here and there. There is, in the revenue budget, there is no head which gives me the maintenance expenditure on the aircraft. I can't even work out life cycle costs. So, I think perhaps this is, this should ring a bell to the services that this is high time they started changing the format of their budget so that the expenditure is in a much more meaningful way. And once expenditure is in a meaningful way, you can find the flab inside and get it out. Today, whatever is spent on maintenance is it's distributed, it is part of stores, it is part of some salaries also, some of the people who are on the maintenance, their salaries. So, I don't get a, complete figure of how much am I spending on the maintenance of my capability. So,
thank you, Ms. Joshi. I just quickly like to, based on your input and output remark, basically, it is also an expert, sometimes they fail to understand, and you have a lot of projection that comes from the armed forces. For example, last year, Army Vice Chief Lieutenant General Sarat Chand pointed out 21,338 crore capital allocation for the Army modernization was insufficient to cater for the committed payment already of 29,000 crore for 125 ongoing scheme. Then how do we talk about, say, the new project when we say FICV or FRCV project or light tank we are trying to buy for the armed forces specific to the Army? How do we achieve such things? Gaurav, if you can comment on this, then I'll come back to Ms. Joshi on this aspect.
I would actually, request ma'am also only to comment on this because, I think this is, how we follow this is more a cash-based methodology in the budget. So you may procure it with because that's why the past spending allocations are coming in. I mean, where I have a committed liability towards past payments, and there is a certain program, and I'm sure internally MOD looks at what projections of future allocations are going to be, and according to that they make the procurements. So I guess this is something which has been worked out by MOD. They have an LTIPP, which is the long-term the plan for procurement in the next 10 years. They have 5 to 7 years program, but how it's managed, as I see it, it's more a cash-based of budget rather than looking at this year. We don't look at what we're going to source. So assuming I want to buy something for 10 billion, I'm not putting 10 billion now. I'm putting it over a period of time because the real spend is going to happen over a period of time. So over to you, ma'am.
Ma'am, your comment on this also, again, to the fact that, I just quoted the armed forces, specific to the army. Let us also talk about, say, we have P-75I project of Navy, and then we have AMCA, such a critical project of Indian Air Force. Then how, and we say we are going to have a substantial R&D budget also. So could you also comment on the R&D aspect of the budget? How much we're going to give it to DRDO? And ultimately, at the end of the day, if we don't build up on research and development and capacity, it is all, like we say, you can keep increasing the level of bridge, but you should, in fact, focus on the river aspect. So, over to Ms. Shobna Joshi on this, please.
So, you see, it's a very detailed exercise which is done, when you are doing the budget. What is called, out of the component of the capital budget of the services, there are two components. One is for the infrastructure, that is the civil works and land and stuff like that. And one is for the what they call the modernization budget for the defense acquisitions. Then modernization budget itself, there are two parts. The services do the contract monitoring. So the minute a contract is signed, it becomes a committed liability. And from there, they prepare it almost like, like a PERT chart or what would be prepared. They map out the entire liabilities over the years depending on the delivery schedules. So, and typically that will vary from service to service. The Navy is a very capital intensive, long gestation period because, the ships are, things like ships and all, they have to be built. So there are a lot of milestones and things like that. So typically it might be even a 10-year profile of cash outgoes. In a case of a supply kind of situation where the equipment is to be supplied, it's just a system or equipment which has to be supplied. You factor in the lead times of the manufacturer and then whatever are the delivery schedules which have been fixed. And then you map out what would be the outgoes in each year. And once you've done all that mapping out, say you're preparing the budget for this year, for the next year, 22-23. So there you will, kind of see what are the liabilities or the payments which are going to come in 22-23, and then total that up and then say, okay, these would be my committed liabilities. This much money I definitely need to meet my committed liabilities. And whatever is left out of that would be your what you would spend for the new schemes. And in the committed liabilities also, typically I remember we used to keep a cushion of about 20-30% of slippages, because sometimes some of the long programs get delayed, so the payment gets delayed. So it's a very dynamic kind of situation. But it's a systematic exercise. It's not as if it's just something which is thought of out of the blue. So what I suppose the Vice Chief meant at that time is that taking into account what the Army already has contracted, this much money is needed to service those contracts. Now, if the budget provides only that much money which is there for servicing those contracts, then there's nothing left to start the new schemes. And the new schemes also, what you actually cater for, then when you come down to the new schemes, you typically cater for, you firstly see at what stage they are. You don't necessarily have to not start the scheme. In fact, the other important aspect is that I remember, at least in my time, we used to have 100% cushion of schemes in the pipeline, because schemes take their own time to materialize, and there are always some schemes which are closed. So there is going to be some slippages, or what should I say, some schemes might not materialize at all. They get closed. So that cushion of schemes is always in hand. It's not as if you are just taking up only those cases with reference to the budget available. So what we actually see when we are working out the budget is, what are the schemes which are at at a stage where they can be now converted into contracts, and we'll need to spend some money. So, that is the list we prepare, and that's a list we send to Finance Ministry and discuss with them that we anticipate that these new schemes are going to go ahead.
Right. Exercise, I know it's evolving exercise as well, keeping with other sectors. Those debates are all important. But here we, as you also pointed out, it is also up to the armed forces to navigate through what we have and what we have at the moment. For example, how we can optimize what we have in terms of defense budget. For example, Navy has started, they were the first one to procure the Guardian drones using the lease model. Gaurav, based on the DAVP, you have studied a lot. You have also published a lot of analysis on DAP 2022. What armed forces can do to optimize this budget by using such new platforms, for example, leasing the equipment in the case of Guardian drones. What others can do? Can you point out some of the highlights which armed forces can do using the DAP 2022 and optimize the budget what we have, the best way out? To Gaurav.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting proposition which came up in DAP 2020, and it is not only in India, but it's also followed overseas as well. And as we speak, I think I interact with a lot of foreign OEMs as well as the government on the other side. In the Aero Show, which is starting day after tomorrow, this is going to be one of the propositions which a lot of OEMs plan to discuss with the Indian defense leadership, because this is an area which would work both sides. I mean, India doesn't have to get into a capital acquisition outlay, a significant capital acquisition outlay. Secondly, you get all these equipments very quickly. And number three, the onus on maintenance of some of these equipments could, be on the foreign OEMs, and training and everything else. So everything comes in one go. And as we call in a concept, in other terminologies, a wet lease kind of a concept, where you not only give the equipment, you give, the training, you give all the maintenance and everything else. I think it's an area which is worth exploring, and as we speak, this area is being explored. I think, like today, there was a mention, and it's been a short period, so I not analyzed it, but there were certain exemptions which were given for, I think, civil side of aircraft leasing, for example, and there were some certain benefits are given. If those kind of SOPs are also thrown in, because end of the day, things like tax and all that only increase the cost for an OEM, and they pass it on to the government anyways, right? So if those kind of measures are also pushed into this whole frame of leasing, I think this is a area which could potentially be used, whether it's the trainers, because again, you may need trainers for a while. You don't need the trainers for all the while. Once you have enough and more pilots who have been trained on a certain platform, those trainers can go back. They can be used elsewhere by the OEM. So I think this is one of the biggest areas of, as I see it, as I hear from the industry, of discussions which is going to take place day after when the Aero Show begins.
Thanks, Gaurav. Coming back to, I think, towards the end of the discussion to Ms. Shobhana Joshi, you have been again part of the formulation of defense budget specific. Again, I'm talking about the building capacity, and here comes the DRDO, the role of DRDO, and the whole budget is basically is a sum of all is given to armed forces and DRDO. Do you think time has come there should be a separate budget for the research and development specific to DRDO marked for the accountability, performance, and also delivery to the armed forces for building capability. What is your take on such a crucial thing coming ahead? Ms. Joshi, could you comment on this aspect?
No, DRDO has, its budget is, it's not a major head, it's not a major separate demand for grant, but it is part of the, the defense service estimates. Which I was telling that what is come this year as 3.47 lakh crores. So DRDO is a separate head under that, and that budget is given to DRDO, and they are accountable to spend it. But there are various models, I would say, because sometimes there are some schemes whereby some part of the expenditure is met by the services, some is met by the DRDO, so then there is a pooling of resources. But if you typically see some of the, in fact, this is one of the questions I once asked one of the the essay to the secretary DRDO, that why is it that in some of your projects which you've particularly taken up on mission mode, like your missile programs, have been really successful, while some projects have just failed to take off. I think a lot of it has also to do with the model of the program, and also a lot of it has also to do with the way the service is able to steer it. See, somehow the Navy found a nice via media, and if you see the submarine program, the what we are really not supposed to speak about, but the secret projects of the submarine programs have been very successful. And one of the reasons for this is that they have been able to really work out a nice model whereby which the DRDO, the industry, and the Navy together, they have a kind of working group or a board or whatever, and they have been able to steer it. So I think a lot of it is also to do with finding the right management structure. Instead of just doing fault finding. If you keep saying that DRDO is trash, you're doing nothing, then they'll do nothing. But if you work around them and try to find this and find a solution, then I'm sure it's possible, because otherwise it's difficult to believe that in some really futuristic things they have been able to achieve success, but just to design a rifle or a tank, it's taken them years and it's not worked well. So I think a lot of it is also to do with the kind of working model the respective service is able to reach with.
Right. Ms. Joshi, also towards the end of the discussion, an important question. What about the emergency budget for the armed forces? I understand last year some about 2 billion of budget was sanctioned under the emergency situation, knowing situation at the Ladakh, at LAC and other places. How do you, where do you see this emergency budget adding to this existing defense allocation?
I would spend some time once more details are available, but what I can gather from this is that whatever figures have increased in the RE, particularly as I told you in the capital, there has been a substantial increase, 23,000 crores or something. Perhaps that would have been what was spent for these emergency procurements. Why it's not as whatever was procured under the emergency head. See, there are two separate things. One is why they are called emergency procurements, because there are some special procedures to be followed for these emergency procurements. You don't have to go through the normal channel of procurements. You can, there's a faster method, what is called the fast track procedure. So therefore, they are called emergency procurements because they are under a different procedure. But budget will be provided from the same budget only. So wherever, what my pointer is, wherever there has been a substantial increase in that head, in the revised estimates relating to equipment and procurement, say ammunition head, I'm sure that would have been used for the emergency procurements.
Thank you. To Gaurav Mehndiratta, coming back to your last question, knowing the budget, knowing the limitation, also a marginal increase in the capital budget. what is the take for the industry? How government can utilize such thing in Make in India? Again, you pointed out, what is the message for the industry within the budget bracket in terms of our indigenization project, in terms of procurement from our defense private companies? Could you comment on this aspect, please?
I think that has to be the future, Manish. That has to be the future, that private players, whether Indian, foreigners, whatever, I mean, or joint ventures, get a fair play in this space, and that's where things which may have worked to a certain extent, and in the past, if they really need a different trigger, you need to bring private players in, and for that the preference in some sense sometimes given to the public sector undertakings should be kind of obviated, or a need for that should be obviated. Number two, Make in India you talked about, and I talked about it earlier. The DPEPP, which was the Defense Production Policy, actually talked about the fact that India, and when the negative list also came out, that we currently produce, equipment and the other defense, goods worth 70,000 crores. That needs to move to 140,000 crores in 4 years, and with a 15% CAGR, and the budget will provide for that, distinction in the budget, that this is going to be imports and this is going to be local budget going forward. I know situation is different. It's dynamic right now. You can't commit because you need to, procure at emergency situations. But the fact of the matter is that plan needs to be laid out, and I really wanted to see that line coming in from India and from overseas, and that starts to show that 15% growth in every year from local sources, which then gives the private industry really confidence to start investing. Today they're really not confident enough to start investing because they feel, if certain things has to be bought quickly, India goes overseas. Otherwise, it's the public sector undertakings. Why would anyone put in money? But having said that, I think those statements during DAP doing a negative list, very positive, but it's just that reliance on just PSUs need to go down a little bit, and private sector needs to come in, and even in research, make to there were categories which were where the research can be done, funded by the government, by private players. That really hasn't picked up. I mean, not many programs have gone that side and all that. So again, those things need to be considered, and actually a robust private industry needs to is the need for the mid to long term.
Thank you, Gaurav. I think I would like to sum it up. The one side, it's all about the fiscal prudence. We understand, that's 95% of fiscal imbalance is a serious concern, and that has impacted our defense budget. But having said that, there has been an increase in capital allocation. There is a silver lining, as Defense Secretary, Finance Defense Secretary, she has pointed out, and also there's a lot of potential within the budget. What we have, according to Gaurav Mehendiratta, KPMG, whatever we have, we can make it. We look forward to building capability within the system. So thank you so much, panelists. Thank you so much, Ms. Shobna Joshi and Gaurav Mehendiratta. Thank you for coming on BW Defense and BW Business World. Thank you. Thank you very much.